Good morning, Striker Texas family. It is Chris Bils and Victor Araiza here at PNC Stadium. Second Copa Tejas match day in MLS this year. It's Houston Dynamo hosting Austin FC. And Victor, we don't get to say good morning too often on
Yeah, I
these.
was just about to say. I mean, it is. It's an early game. What is this matinee? Starting off the weekend, I think it might be the game to watch for the week. But I mean, well, the powers that be scheduled it for this time. It's obviously going to be national television, available all over the country on Unimas and obviously on cable on TUDN. So it's going to be
Yep.
one to watch. Copa Tejas, obviously those implications. Houston, coming off a 2-1 loss at FC Dallas, so that sort of sets the scene here for as far as the Copa Tejas race, getting back into that race, getting losing to a rival but trying to beat up another rival. And in the case of Austin, well, they're still looking to win away in Texas, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, they're 0 for 3 at this point, 0 for 4 if you include the San Antonio match just last week in
The
U.S.
Open
Open
Cup.
Cup. And so, these fans, they travel in numbers. We expect a big crowd again today. A lot of them getting on buses around 7 this morning. Lots of coffee, maybe flowing a little bit more than beer. I'm sure that they've had a few by the time
Maybe a
they
little
get
bit
in
of
the
both.
stadium. Yeah, maybe a little bit of both. Get some breakfast and you stop at Buc-ee's. I made the obligatory Buc-ee's stop this morning. That's not a paid advertisement, but hey, Buc-ee's, if anybody's watching, let us know. But Victor, what do you expect from the atmosphere today? Well, we could talk a little bit about the piece that Phil West put out. Just about sort of the goings on the last time that Austin was here. But in general, I think that it's an exciting day, and it's exciting for the culture of the sport in the state that we can have these short road trips and such a lively atmosphere
Yeah,
here in the stadium.
yeah. You were asking me, right prior to starting, we're kind of just discussing things, and you were like, well, is this where does this one compare with the Texas Derby? You think this can grow? And I think we've seen, yeah, online banter, all that discussion. I mean, these rivalries, and I think maybe you could say the same for Dallas. Yeah, it's gotten more heat online, right? In the stadium, there's obviously going to be a big crowd from Austin FC visiting. Games this season, I was telling you, are being more electrified. I feel even if the attendance is pretty much staying the same. This team from Paulo Nagamura getting Darwin Quintero back on the field, trying to be more attack oriented, trying to get
Mhm.
forward. Has gotten fans out of their seats a little bit, has gotten them excited, has gotten them interested in what's going on the field, right? So yeah, I think atmosphere wise is going to be great.
Expect some tifo to
Yeah,
go up. We were just looking out over our shoulder here. It looks like the
yeah, and,
fans are
and
getting
I'm
ready to
eager
do
to see
something.
what that is. I'm wondering if that's a answer to the capital of Texas tifo we saw a couple weeks back, and
That's
I
true.
think. But I mean that's part of it, right? I mean, so long as it stays healthy and it stays within respectful limits, um, the fan atmosphere it's really what makes these
Hmm.
rivalries. We've seen it up in Portland and Seattle, right? The battle of the tifos, and I think if we can start getting some of that here in Texas, then yeah, I think these rivalries would grow. I think they've shown that they're growing. Austin is different from a rival from what Houston has with
Yeah,
Dallas. Obviously, that's more of a metroplex versus the biggest city in Texas, right?
but I
And
think there is a little bit of that complex, and it's interesting, right? Because Austin's this up and coming city, and I think culturally, there's a lot of things
yeah,
that are different when it comes to Houston and Dallas and those sort of established Texas roots, and this one means maybe a little bit more to the Austinites that grew up in the city and have watched their city rise, and but it also means a lot to people that grew up here in Houston or grew up in Dallas. I think the
right.
Copa Tejas is going to, it means a ton to those fans that maybe grew up watching games here at this stadium and now they decided that they're going to put on the Verde and rep that. And so I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
folks coming, with that interest in mind.
Yeah,
And
but I do think there is a little bit less animosity. There's hatred between
mm,
Houston and Dallas, whereas with Austin, it's more of there's a friendly rivalry feel to it, right? I think part of it is because there's so much transit between Houstonians going to Austin, coming back, and vice versa, right? People from Houston, right, going to UT and studying, coming back and making their careers. Houstonians going to Austin and spending a weekend there. I mean, so I do think there is a bit of a more familiarity between the two cities, and that's what makes this fun.
yeah, yeah. And it's going to be, like I mentioned earlier, I sort of teased it. If you don't know what we're talking about, go check out the piece that Phil West went up yesterday on the Striker Texas about an incident that did happen last year. We hope that everything stays civil. Both coaches weighing in, lots of great voices on that one, just about like the way that the fan culture is developing in Austin, how it's maybe a little bit different from Houston, and also some of the precautions and some of the things that both clubs are doing to sort of make sure that things stay respectful,
Right.
both within the lines and outside the lines. And I think that's important, but it's also, we don't want to overstate things. I think that for the most part, I think most people are coming to the stadium to enjoy the soccer. And, I'm really excited to see what we see here today on the field, though, Victor. We put up a big preview as well. Go check that out on the Striker Texas. But you coined the phrase. I think it's a good one. It's Seba versus Seba, or Sebas versus Seba.
Yeah.
Right? They're both Sebastian, but they've taken different spins on that nickname, and they're
and they're
little
both
different
South
players.
Americans, right? One's Argentine, the other one's Paraguayan. Obviously, different positions. One's taking care of the midfield. It's in the MVP talk around the league. The other one wants to be in the MVP talk, wants to be in the Golden Boot race. Those were his intentions when he got here over the offseason. And he's spoken about his ambition of wanting to get to Europe. But obviously, uh, life has been a little tough to start in Houston for Sebastian Ferreira, trying to get some goals, trying to get some service. He's not going to come out in the media. He's not going to come out publicly and bash some of his teammates or talk about his frustration. But when you see it on the field, it's exactly that. You can see his frustration. You can see his lack of service. Whereas Austin looks like they've sort of got it going on already. They understand each other a little better. Maybe
well,
that's
I think
good
it's
too.
that difference of us, and we're talking about Sebastian Drusi for Austin FC, of course, joint Golden Boot leader in the league with 6 goals so far to start the season. He's also got, I think, 3 assists. So, really strong start for him. He's right at the top of the MVP race according to MLSsoccer.com. I think we think that highly of him here, obviously at the Striker Texas as well. And it helps when Austin FC has had the start that they've had, second in the league standings right now in the Western Conference. And like you said, Sebastian Ferreira coming in the offseason, these are both record signings for their clubs. And, he's still settling in. It takes some time for a guy coming from Paraguay to settle into the league. We saw that last year with Austin FC. And we're seeing it with Sebastian Ferreira. But I think there's been plenty to feel excited about, especially the last few weeks, right, from him and the rest of this
Yeah,
Dynamo squad.
you can tell he's a goal scorer. You can tell he's special. The kid has confidence. He wants to score. He wants to be the star. He doesn't shy away from that tag, right, of being the most expensive. Of course, he's the most expensive until the summer when Hector Herrera gets here. But he doesn't shy away from being that, associated with that tag of being the most expensive signing, transfer fee plus salary. He wants the attention. He wants to be the guy for Houston. And I think the only difference is it's up to the team now. The head coach Paulo Nagamura, the general manager Pat Onstad, to now help him with the supporting cast, making him successful, setting him up to succeed. We saw last week Nico Estevez taking a little bit of ownership, right, accountability after the game, saying, maybe it's my fault. I might have set my team up bad tactically. I'm not saying that's the case here in Houston, but I do think there are little things that can help, because in the end, Houston for a long time has had this group of guys, right, that is working together as a team. But I think we've seen it across all sports. There's certain players that are stars, and you gotta let them be the star. You gotta give them the ball. You gotta let them win you games.
And I think that's what Josh Wolf's learning as well in his second year, sort of letting and building a system really around Sebastian Drusi, what he can do going forward, but also what he can do defensively and leading that front line in the press. And him and Maxi Urruti have been really good. Of course, Maxi Urruti, we just saw him over our shoulder. And he's he was checking out PNC Stadium for the first time while we were here in preseason, but that doesn't really count. First time he'll be in front of the full house in Verde. He said he's got a lot of friends still on the team in Houston. Definitely, well-liked guy in every single locker room he's been in, and we've seen the impact of that in Austin. But do you believe him when he says if he scores today, he's not going to celebrate?
We'll see, right? I mean, I don't think he'll celebrate. I don't think he'll overly celebrate. Let's put it that way. But the bow and arrow, that might come out.
Maybe like a little finger bow and arrow, like
yeah. No, I think he'll
like a rubber band.
Of course, he'll celebrate. I mean, even if it's just hugs or what. I mean, I think he has something to prove, right? I mean, I think he's a guy that you can tell loves the sport, right? He lives it, he breathes it. He's
Hmm.
not a guy that just shows up and trains. He's a guy that goes home and watches games. He just, I mean, you can tell it's in his mind all the time. Um, and the camaraderie that he's brought to Austin, I mean, I think maybe it was something that he couldn't bring here to Houston. There's talks about,
Well, I mean, he had an up and down year right last year, and there was also COVID
right,
was a
COVID was a
factor,
thing that affected him as well.
and it affected him, but also I think the team and in the way that they were able to get together. And that's a big thing that we've talked about. Brad Stuver mentioned it last week in the press conference after after Austin FC's win last week, and I think it's been interesting to see how this team's come together. How much do you credit that to Max Cerruti? How much do you credit to other veteran players from this league like Ethan Finley and
I think a
Matt
lot.
Martins? And I think that that's been the big difference. Even Ruben Gabrielson, I think, has been a big contributing factor to that. And you've seen so far what that's meant to Austin FC. Of course, Houston Dynamo, a lot of familiar faces, but still getting used to life under Paulo Nagamura. But I think it's been really impressive, and it's really exciting when we talk about being here. We were here last year for these games, and especially toward the end of the year, it was like it's kind of like it's kind of best of the worst, right? And now this year, these games are meaningful because if you win Copa Tejas, feel pretty confident in saying that winning Copa Tejas, you're going to be in the playoffs. You win
This year,
you
yeah.
win these matches, you're going to be in the playoffs. I think the way these teams have set
Yeah,
themselves up.
and they're sort of. I mean, they were kind of closer in the beginning. Now they're starting to spread apart a little bit. Um, I think every team, each of three of the Texas team has done something over the offseason to get better. I think we do have to mention a bit of the schedule has helped them both in at least in Austin's case and Houston's case as well. Some of the rivals. Now we're starting to get into some better challenges. Starting to see what these teams are really made of. Right as the weeks kind of go on. Obviously, Austin has a little bit of a cushion there with early wins, right? It's easier to believe in what Josh Wolf wants to do when he has the results to back
For
him,
sure.
right?
Yeah, that's a big factor.
Where with Paulo Nagamura, now that some of the results are starting to, to be a little, on uneasy ground.
Right.
A loss here at Austin, for example, that can kind of wane some confidence, right, among some of the players. I mean, I'm saying because we've seen that before with the same roster of guys. So I mean, and ultimately, it's professional sports. Guys want to win.
Mhm.
Egos start to kind of get in the mix. So I think that's just it's part of the game.
Yeah, let's get into a little bit of what we expect to see. We like what we just mentioned. We saw some of the Austin players milling around. They got here yesterday, spent the night, and with an early kickoff. Probably a smart move. But we saw some of the guys on the field. A couple names worth mentioning that made the trip. Denny Osen was walking around out here. Owen Wolf, I saw. Of course, the familiar faces. Doesn't seem like anybody's missing. So we'll hopefully get lineups to you, shortly. But one guy also that was down here that I wrote about this week, John Gallagher, caught up with him last week at a community event that he was at, and was talking a little bit about his transition to left back and how he's really embraced that role. And Victor, I don't know what you expect from Houston, but I was thinking about just how Griffin Dorsey as well has kind of made that transition from winger to fullback, and
Yeah,
it's
and
going to be a
actually,
factor tonight.
I commend you because I do think for Austin that is the key to the game. Attacking a guy like him
Mhm.
has been a hard worker, but I do think has hit a plateau in a certain sense. Like some of the players, I mean, because at the end, this is still part of the same roster. This Houston is still rebuilding. I do think there's still some more pieces, some places where they need to, um, maybe start turning the page a little bit. Griffin Dorsey, I mean, he hasn't given up that spot, but it's going to be interesting to see now how much he can continue to be playing at a good level before he essentially, does he relinquish the spot to
Right.
Seca, the Brazilian?
Yeah, I mean that's a big spot I think to watch in this match. How Austin FC's wingers can attack, and before we get into a little bit more on that, and this is Cecilio Dominguez's situation, which I think it's important to touch on some of the reporting that we had this week on the Striker Texas. What do you expect to see from the Dynamo as far as a game plan, as far as coming out trying to dictate their game here against an Austin FC team that's obviously going to come in hungry for their second road victory of the year.
Houston has been explosive in certain games. I think, I know it might be a little hot here at kickoff. It's
Yeah,
different in
I was
some
going
of
to
the other
mention that
games.
it's warm, it's humid.
But I think it's
Shocker.
Yeah, but I think no. But this is one of the keys that they've mentioned. They want it to be a tough place to play. They wanted this to be a place where other teams come in and suffer, right? So I think that from the start, you go out, you try to get the first goal. I think that's part of the strategy with the way they're kind of playing with tight margins, anyways. They need to get in the lead and just kind of not allow teams to get back in like they did with Dallas last week. They need to put this out of reach, in a sense, right? And sort of let the Heat start to work and asphyxiate Austin a
Yeah.
little bit. But Austin's not that far up the road, so I mean, maybe
Well,
Clement might not be a
and I
factor,
say
and that's why these
that
derbies
yeah,
are great to
that's
watch.
actually I think a good test of what we can expect to see as the summer wears on. Now, Austin doesn't have as many matches in Texas as they played a year ago. Of course, opening Q2 Stadium and having that big stretch of matches in July and August at home, which actually I think kind of hurt them as tightly as they were packed together. But having a year under David Tenney, learning the players, I think the players that hadn't played in Texas before, learning how their bodies react to that heat. Today will be a
But that's
first
part of
test
the
of that.
schedule, Chris. I
It
mean,
is.
that's why I
There's
think.
no excuses. I'm just saying, like this is I think a good preview
Yeah, and
of
I mean,
what we're going
I've
to
said it
see.
over the years. I think one of the biggest knocks against Houston has been underestimating that schedule a little bit, the
Yeah,
more congested part of the schedule, and that's what makes these games at the beginning of the year much more important. That's why you need to get these home points in your pocket as soon as you can, because otherwise you're suffering at the end of the year.
yeah, and Austin FC's done that, of course, undefeated at home. Only one win on the road, though, and that came against DC United, where they had to score 3 goals the last 10 minutes to pull that one off. And, of course, then going on the road to San Antonio, losing an Open Cup match in extra time against San Antonio FC will kind of live in the memories. And like you said, they still haven't won a match in Texas. And so I think that monkey's not completely off their back yet. And today would do
Oh,
wonders as
today would
far
be
as
a
that.
big win. I
It would
think it
be
would be a
today would be
statement.
a statement, I think, from Austin FC. But by the same token, I think that Houston's got a chance to make a statement
Yeah,
and really put.
they're still undefeated at home.
Yep.
They need to stay undefeated at home. And like I told you, I mean, I think once we start getting past mid-May, a huge chunk of the schedule, more than half the games, are on the road. Um, some months are uneven, right? Especially in the summer, and that's kind of what's going to make it a little tough for these, and especially again, like you said, a more congested road schedule, right? Where we start to getting like 3 games in the span of a week, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
it's
when these,
where depth comes in, and
yeah,
especially when
and where Houston has fallen apart over
yeah,
the years.
and Houston's still in the Open Cup as well, which it's I know it's a competition they like to take seriously, but as you head into the summer, that's something you got to be mindful of as well. Of course, when we talk about depth, one of the areas that Austin FC, was came into the season really feeling good about. One area that not feeling as great about is that winger position because Cecilia Dominguez remains suspended. League investigation into off-field potential possible off-field misconduct. Of course, we learned at the Striker Texas. Go check out all the coverage we got on that. A possible domestic abuse situation with his ex-partner. Nothing physical, but you know complaints of verbal and emotional abuse, and just how do we think about that as fans? How do we think about that as sports fans? Jessica Luther, great journalist, Austin based, and an Austin FC fan who's really an expert on these subjects, really dove into that with help from a professor, Dr. Lee Goodman, and I thought it was just a tremendous piece and lots of good context around both this situation and other situations because it's sports, but and we know we like
Yeah,
to.
there's a human element
There's
to
a
it as
human
well.
element, and there's these things they happen, and but how do we react as fans, and how does the club react? There's still a lot of work left to do on that end, and a lot of reporting still left to do. So continue to stay tuned into the Striker Texas. We know a lot of you were really interested in that when that went up yesterday. So
Yeah,
thanks so much for the
props to Jessica,
yeah
props
props
to
to
Phil.
yep.
Great reporting this week. Obviously, you did a good job with the Cecilio piece as well. So yeah, I mean that's the kind of stuff we want to do at the Striker Texas, right?
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
the whole
Keeping our
reason.
editor Johanna Gretschel busy. That's what we like to do. But yeah, and switch shifting. It's a hard transition, but shifting back on the field. Also, like the name that's been bubbling up. We're getting closer. We're getting closer, Victor, to Hector Herrera being on the field here in Houston.
Yeah,
But
La Liga's almost done.
yeah. What are we thinking about how that's going to change the complexion here in Houston, both in terms of performance on the field, their ability to pursue playoffs, pursue Copa Tejas, but also to put some more fans in the seats.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a big level up, right? I mean, on the field, it's going to be a guy that just brings things up a notch. Today I think we're still as we're waiting for lineups, and we're trying to see if we can get some of these to you. Mati Vera was one of the players who, by the way, spot might be on the line once Herrera gets here, just like many other guys. But obviously, looks like maybe got an injury in Dallas. We've got trouble seeing him. We've only had access to the last 15 minutes of training this week, but I haven't seen him this week. Wouldn't be a surprise if we don't see him on the field today. But that's one of the guys that how is he going to fit into this scheme? Where is Nagamura going to change the lineup a little bit as far as putting Hector Herrera on the field? Will that bench a guy like Mati Vera? What does that mean for Darwin Seren, or is Herrera simply going to be a guy filling the spot of departing Coco Carrasquilla if he doesn't stay past this loan? I mean, there is a lot of questions heading into the summer, and I do think that, like as mentioned, there's still positions where Houston can still get better. There's still a couple of the Brazilians that haven't gotten enough minutes maybe on the field. Um, I imagine they're going to be part of the picture, right? Seca at right back. We're talking about Thiago, who has yet to debut in MLS. But we could see him on one of the wings and seeing what that means for Houston. I do think long-term, bigger picture, Houston has um, or the ability to be maybe the better team in Texas. But we'll see if this all comes to fruition. It always looks good on paper, as maybe we saw last year in Austin, and sometimes it just doesn't come to be.
Yeah, and sometimes it maybe doesn't come to be right away. Especially with a big signing like that. Of course, we know what Hector Herrera can do. We know he's the type of player that should translate well. But how does he fit in with the rest of the group, and how does that all come together? I want to touch on another subject as we're waiting on lineups. Again, we'll get those to you as soon as we can. But this Copa Tejas, I think last year was a fun kickoff. I wrote a little bit about the trophy. I was there when FC Dallas clinched it. I think it met a ton of the fans. But I think there was a little bit of a disconnect, certainly in Austin. I'm not sure about how you feel in Houston, about how much this means to the actual teams and the players, and whether that's equal to what it means for the fans. Because I think for the fans, they want these to be treated like playoff games. And I mentioned earlier, the way I feel about this year, when you've got 4 matches against in-state competition, I think that if you treat these like playoff games, you get the points from them. I think you've got a good chance of being in the playoffs.
Yep.
Is that how these teams should approach it, or do you think that it's still you've got to still protect yourself as far as?
No, I think it's the same with Houston. There's a lot of differing opinions, right? Some players have said, and by the way, this piece is up as well on the StrikerTexas.com. I think we got a good search function now, right? If you go see what Copa Tejas means to Dynamo players,
for sure.
There's different views on it, right? I mean, Fafa Pico, for example, who got the most goals in the Copa Tejas games last year. For him, he wants to win these rivalry games. He gets up for them, right? I mean, he wants to lead his team to victory. There's other players that just like it's just another game. To me, that cup doesn't really mean a lot. I mean, so it varies. I think ultimately, all 3 of these teams are big. We know the big picture. It is wanting to get to the MLS Cup playoffs. But yeah, I think little by little, you're starting to see some of the players realize what it means to fans, what it means for the bragging rights, and what it means locally. Because a lot of these players are foreigners, right? I mean, there isn't like a lot of super homegrown talent like there is up in Dallas, and maybe that's why Dallas treats it also a little bit differently, because they have the homegrown talent. Whereas Houston's still trying to get some academy kids still in the first team, Austin as well, and maybe that'll bring the flavor up even more, intensify it. But yeah, I think you're like you say, if it's treated like playoff games, we're gonna have some great encounters.
I know, yeah, and I think that was the problem that I think a lot of Austin fans had last year when they went up to Frisco. And they felt like it was kind of a slap in the face to put out a rotated squad. Of course, dealing with squad congestion, dealing with all those 3-match weeks, and trying to emphasize games
and with
at home.
The traveling squad as well.
Right.
I mean,
yeah. So I think but that's something that I think that when the fans travel all the way here, they really want to see a strong squad, and we're about to find out. I think
and they want to sing it in the opposing teams.
They do.
I mean, in the opposing fans' faces. Yeah,
I think they almost want those 2 road matches, and it's just 2 this year with the way the schedule sets up. They want those 2 road matches to be treated as matches just as seriously as I think they want to make Q2 a fortress. But when you're on the road in Texas, you got to put on a show, and I think that's the expectation that the fans are going to set, and we'll see if the players can match it.
Yeah, and the other thing is too. I mean, maybe sometimes managers are thinking, well, I mean, how much is this really going to save my job? Well, we've seen it maybe in other leagues, in other countries. It maybe is something that gets you a little longer leash with the public, with the fans, winning these kind of games. I think you've seen it. You've seen it a little bit.
I think it means a lot. I think it means a lot, and it's a beautiful trophy. I think we waited until the end of the year to see exactly what it was going to look like. Of course, had that great unveiling up, for the final up in Frisco. Houston wasn't part of that though, and I imagine after, especially after losing last week, um, you know, this one's a big one to at least keep one hand attached to that trophy and
Yeah,
leave
and the
yourself a
trophy
chance.
is actually here this weekend. Right across the street, one of the bars, a Brian Drinks bar, Pix 25.
Yeah,
The trophies are on display. The fans get to see it. I mean, kind of like you said, rush a little bit, but yeah, they're going to want it for themselves at the end of the season. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly one way the players can kind of rescue the season a little bit. But yeah, ultimately, I mean, the coaches, they want to make the playoffs. They want to get there, and they should, right? With the rosters that Houston and Austin have, I think both we can say should be contending, if not being inside the playoff line at the end of the year. There really is no excuse.
yeah, for sure. And I'm still waiting on those lineups. Just inside an hour from kickoff. Of course, you can watch the match on Unimas. And if you're looking for the English broadcaster, you don't have Unimas. You can check it out on Twitter on Today NA. I think we'll make sure we share that out on the Striker Texas feed as well. So it's exciting. I think the early kickoff is going to be a fun one. It is warm here, so I expect maybe some water breaks. Maybe, like I said, a first test of fitness early in the season. We're only 9 matches in, and the players should be, in really good shape. We saw Austin FC go 120 last week, and Diego Fagundes played almost 300 minutes last week before he finally tapped out 81 minutes in to that match last week. And we'll see. I think he'll be back out on the field tonight, and we'll see how long these guys can go.
Yeah, that sort of leads into a topic I want to ask you about. So Fagundes has been one of the guys,
Yeah.
and we had him on the Striker MLS podcast as well. More ingrained in the community, right? A lot of what Austin has done here in their first 2 years kind of reminds me of that early Houston Dynamo team, right? With the Pat Onstats, the Brad Davises, the Brian Chings, Eddie Robinsons, trying to ingrain themselves a little bit more into the community as well. I'm wondering if you think that's been part of the key to Austin's success.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's been a big part. I think as far as Austin FC coming together on the field, but I want to make sure we get the lineups out right now. We've got Austin FC's lineup dropping. I think I just saw Houston's drop into my inbox as well. So for Austin, it'll be Brad Stuver in goal. No surprise there. Nick Lima at right back. Julio Cascante, Ruben Gabrielson, and the John Gallagher left back experiment continues. So that'll be fun to watch how he does. Again, check out the story on the Striker Texas I wrote earlier in the week. Midfield, 3 of Danny Pereira, Alex Ring, and Sebastian Drusi. No surprises there. And the front line, as you'd expect, Ethan Finley on the right, Max Ciaruti in the middle, Diego Fagundes on the left. And on the bench, it's Johan Valencia, Danny Hosen, Rodney Redis, Kip Keller, Felipe Martins, Hector Jimenez, Jean Kolmanich, Andrew Tarbell, and Owen Wolf. So that's the 11 and the bench for Austin FC. Again, John Gallagher starts at left back. Jean Kolmanich on the bench again to start this one, but everything else remains about as you'd expect.
Yeah, and if you were listening, you've been following us here for almost the full half hour.
Yeah.
We were talking about Matias Vera and potentially not being part of the squad. Does not come out on the injury report, but again, not part of this team today, and that doesn't come as much surprise because we have been following this case. So, so there is that change in the lineup. Steve Clark in goal for Houston. The back four of Adam Lundqvist, Tim Parker, Tino Chadebe, who returns after that suspension 2 weeks ago against Portland, and Griffin Dorsey as well. So in the middle, you're going to have Alberto Carrasquilla. Looks like he might be manning the 8th position a little bit by himself. And in front of him, you're going to have Memo Rodriguez and Darwin Quintero. Up front, the 3 guys we expected. Tyler Pasher on one side, Papa Pico on the other, and the number 9 role, Sebastian Ferreira.
Darwin Quintero in the 11. We know how dangerous he can be. Danny Pereira learned that last year. And, of course, he said that was really the moment that woke him up as a professional. So 30 seconds in, Darwin Quintero scored. He starts tonight. That was the last time Austin FC played here in Houston on September 11th. Should be a fun one. Again, Unimas, Twitter. You can follow our live coverage all game long on the Striker Texas. And check out post-game reaction, both from Victor on the Houston side, me on the Austin side. This is going to be a wrap for us, but enjoy the match here at PNC Stadium, 12:38 kickoff. Should be a fun one.